Teenagers and depression is usually not a very good combination. A recent study shows a correlation between social media use and increased depression rates for teenagers. Joining me now in studio to discuss this is Bretherick, a registered psychologist and president of Run Free Ministries and author as well of Healing Life's Hurts. Welcome back to Bridge City News.
Thank you, Hal. It's good to be here again.
Now, Graham, a study by researchers at a hospital in Montreal found that screen time, especially on social media, is linked to increased depression on teenagers. So how can we really combat that?
Well, it doesn't surprise me to hear that. And I think one of the ways we combat is they need to interact. When you're on screen all the time, you're very isolated emotionally, you're isolated cognitively. And so that isolation, let me just define, can I define depression for you?
Sure, go ahead,
It's very different than most people's. I see depression as anger turned in on yourself. So I'm angry at you, but I can't take it on you because you're my boss, you're my parent, you're my brother, or whatever else, or I feel bad about myself, etc. So it must be my fault. It must be me. So what I'm talking about with depression is I'm really angry at myself. Surprising enough, yeah.
So getting back to screen time, I know a lot of my kids too, they were, either on the Xbox or they're on their phones all the time. And I've noticed there's a bit of a disconnect with their friends when it comes to one-on-one interaction. I don't know about you, but when I was a kid growing up, I'd hop on my bicycle, I'd go out to the arcade, go to my buddies listening to music. We'd go on our bikes and ride till the sun set. After we did our homework, of course, right?
Of course.
So how can we kind of get back to that with a lot of today's young people?
Well, the challenge is you've got the trends of today bending in the direction of this whole social media thing. And I think the only way is that parents have to set up things with kids that they get interaction, they get involved, they have limited time on the screen, etc. I mean, they have to involve themselves in interaction with other people. It's a human race is about interaction and relationships. You
know, it's interesting though, sometimes my kids are playing, like I said, an Xbox game, but they're playing with their buddies in other countries, other cities. They say, hey Dad, I'm interacting with other people, my buddies here, they can hear me on my headset.
Well, but it's a type of interaction, but it's depersonalized. Isn't that what we'd say? It's not face-to-face. And so there's a measure of, it's like being on television all the time. I mean, this is not a real, this is not real life. This is, this is television. If you want to get real life, you get out of the studio and you have real relationship with your wife and your kids and etc.
You mean you're not actually here right now?
Apparently I'm not.
Nice holographic image.
I'm a figment of your imagination.
You know, a lot of times too, Graham, when it comes to young people on Instagram, for instance, a lot of young people, they'll put photos of themselves, they're perfect, their lives are perfect. And then other teenagers may see that, say, my life isn't as perfect, and will they get depressed when they look at others who are leading the so-called perfect lives?
Yes, because really they're saying, I'm angry at myself because I'm not as good as or compared to or whatever. See, again, that's my definition. Depression is when you turn the anger in on yourself. And if you think about it, we often describe depression by its symptoms. But I'm not sure that's the best way to go. There are symptoms related to depression. But I think it's better to be able to say, actually, how does depression come about? So it's in a sense, it's like being put in an old dry well. All right, and so you go down and you put down, and so when you look up, it looks like a long way, can I get out of here? It's muddy and sticky down there, so I feel really stuck. The walls feel like they're caving in on me, and I feel hopeless. That's a good description of depression. It's like a hole in the ground. In fact, geographically or geologically, whatever, what is a depression? It's a hole in the ground.
So how can we really encourage our kids or our grandchildren not to compare themselves with others who have created maybe this false sense of reality?
Well, I mean, they're going to do it anyway. I mean, that's human nature, is to compare. I grew up with a twin brother, and I compared myself to him all the time. And my parents,
did you ever stack up?
I didn't. In fact, in that sense, I always thought I was less than my brother. Now, it was a lie. And see, I believed that, and so I functioned out of that sense of inferiority. And I don't know that I was depressed, but I had times in which I felt really bad about myself. So it might be a type of minor depression in a sense.
So he didn't make you feel bad about yourself, nor did your parents?
No.
But it was kind of like self-critical behavior?
Yeah, and because you see, the issue is my own identity. The issue is, who do I really think I am? When I'm comparing myself to somebody else, I'm going to have a false picture of who I really am.
So how can we then as parents encourage our kids to really look inside themselves and understand how beautiful and special they are, regardless of what people are saying on social media? So they don't compare themselves to others.
Right.
On Instagram or wherever, right?
Well, it's actually about communication. The question is how much family communication occurs. You know, when I occasionally pull my phone up at the table, my wife says, you know, love the ones you're with, Graham. So I put my phone down. You're absolutely right. I shouldn't be on my phone at the dinner table. We should be having interaction and communication. But how much interaction and communication is occurring today in our family systems? Not sure. And I think that's a part of what, so do we have time where we turn the television off and we just work, we turn the internet systems off and we just have time to
put our phones away?
Put our phones away, right.
How important is that communication for building the family dynamic?
Well, I think it's central because life is about communication. I mean, if I don't communicate, I don't really know who you are. You know, before we came on the program, we shared a few things and we talked, and so I get to know a little bit more about Hal Roberts, and you get to know a little bit more about me. So if we don't communicate, we really don't get anywhere in terms of building a sense of confidence, identity, clarity of who I am and what I'm doing in life and where I'm going.
What are some of the symptoms that we should be aware of if we're falling into a state of depression? Certain things we really have to be aware of, not just for ourselves, maybe our spouse and our kids or our grandkids.
Well, loneliness would be one of the factors. Withdrawal, hunger, you know, lack of appetite, a sense of hopelessness, in being inward focused. Those would be sort of the typical symptoms of depression.
And a lot of that would be dealt with through counseling, through medication, maybe a combination of the two?
Well, I'm not a big fan of medication. If we have to use, I can't give medication anyway because I'm a psychologist, not a psychiatrist.
Right.
But I wouldn't recommend it because basically what happens, if you think about what happens to your brain when you get depressed, you're changing your chemistry. Over time, that's what you do. Start believing lies about yourself. Your emotions are an electrochemical factory within you. And so you start believing lies about yourself and you affect your chemistry. So that's why the medical system primarily says, well, let's treat him with antidepressants, because then it will change your chemistry back again, but it never deals with the root. And so when you don't deal with the root, it's gonna build up and catch up again. So we can take drugs till the cows come home. In my estimation, it won't fix anything. Now, if a person is severely depressed, then sometimes we have no choice. Otherwise, they might commit suicide. But we don't want to use drugs. We want to use psychotherapy or counseling to get people back on track. And because it's anger-based. See, that's my premise anyway. It's based on anger. So I'm angry at you because you don't like me, you won't treat me this way, etc. But I can't tell you that because you're bigger than me, you're smarter than me, you're my parent, or you have an authority over me. So it must be my fault. So that's what depression is. I keep turning that anger in on myself. I don't like me.
Is that almost addictive as well? I've worked in the media for 31 years now.
Yes.
And I've worked with many people in the media who can be very self-critical and they're critical of others.
Yes.
They become very toxic in their nature, but they feed off of it. They love the drama, they love the toxicity, and sometimes you have to distance yourself from people like that.
Right.
You know, you pray for them and you really hope that they get better, but it's hard, isn't it?
Yeah, well, because it becomes your identity. And a lot of times our work becomes our identity, which is better to bring our identity into our work than our work become our identity.
How do we make sure we don't bring that home?
Well, it's a learned thing. Same thing for me in counseling. How do I not take depressed people that I'm dealing with and then become depressed myself because I'm dealing with all these depressed people? And I simply have to say, this is my work, and this is my home, and I have to divide between the two.
Recent stats say that the average Canadian teenager spends between 6 to 7 hours in front of a screen, whether it's the phone, their laptop, whatever the case is.
Right.
So as parents, how should we monitor that? And should we maybe have them cut down to 2 to 3 hours a day? Or is that too much of a shock to their system?
It might be. I think we have to provide another alternative. Part of the issue, I think, from my perspective, is parents are not as involved with their kids as they used to be. And so they're both working or they're both involved in some kind of extra home issues, etc. They're out there. And so their kids are not getting the time of family time that they need for the interaction. That's what I feel. We need to rethink about what we're doing in our homes. And that's one of to me, one of the tragedies. We as parents, we're on our phones. We're on the screen. We're watching television and our shows, etc. So our kids are just simply copying us. And that lack of interaction and lack of time together is is difficult.
I remember this one time I took my family out for dinner, and it was quite funny because my kids were sitting beside each other, texting each other, not talking to each other, but guess who they're talking about? Mom and Dad.
Give me your phone. Give me your phone.
Right, give me your phone. Is that what you're saying about? Like, what's going on here? What about online bullying? That's a real issue today in today's society, especially in Western culture here. So as parents, how can we combat that and really protect our children?
Well, bullying is basically anger. Think about it again. You know, if I'm bullying you, I'm an angry individual. I think I can take advantage of you, so I bully you. Now, whether it's online or it's face-to-face, but that's the thing with online. We don't have a lot of understanding of what's going on there. So your daughter or son can be on that and be bullied, and you don't even know what's going on. And that turns into depression, which then sometimes turns into suicide, and we know stories of that.
You know what's really sad is a lot of times I spend time on Twitter.
Right.
I'm in the social media world quite a bit, being in the media here. And a lot of people who are attacking are faceless, nameless people. They'll have an account, and they'll have a picture of a cloud or something, and they're their keyboard warrior. They feel they control and they can attack you.
Right.
And yet I've got my name on social media and my picture, but they're not. They're faceless and nameless.
Right.
So why would I take any credence, or why would I put any stock into what they're having to say? But a lot of people do, don't they?
Right, right. It's a very popular thing to do. And the thing is, the adolescent group is caught up in that whole thing. And if everyone's doing it, why aren't I doing it? So there's the lack of individual identity, a lack of individual understanding of who I really am. And I get caught up. I mean, teens have always been caught up in that. It's not just in this time. Right. But it becomes more difficult because of the involvement on the internet and it's nameless, faceless, etc.
Outside of social media, Graham, what else do you think contributes to depression today?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do, as I've been saying again, is that I'm really angry, but I don't know how to deal with it. I don't know how to describe it. If I'm not having interaction, how do I tell someone? How do I tell my dad or my mom, like, this really frustrated me when you did this? So there's no communication skills out there. So then if I can't tell them, where am I going to take that anger? And a lot of happens, it must be them be my fault. Or I grow and grow in this anger, and then all of a sudden I let it out in a rage. Now, in the news media, the two boys recently who committed those murders or potentially committed those murders, they were two very angry young men. And two very young men, 18 and 19. Yeah, right. Bryce Migelski and Cam McLeod. I know. It's amazing. It's sad. It is, because there's a whole bunch of anger that was never dealt with, and they took it out in rage form, but and they may have come out of depression. I don't know that. I don't know their story well enough. When I was younger, too, I remember, Graham, hearing stories from my friends where their fathers would always put them down. Right. You're a loser. You're never going to amount to very much. It's your fault. It's your fault. And that can really impact somebody's psyche as well. Totally. As a young man or as a young woman. Right. So how do we make sure, as parents, it never reaches that point? And how do we make sure we always build each other up, especially our children? Well, potentially, parents have to come out of their own struggles with who they are and their identity, because you will put somebody down as a reflection of what I feel about myself. Do you feel you're lifting yourself up by putting somebody else down? Yes, they do. It's a false form of trying to elevate yourself. I actually did that myself in my years of inferiority. But how do we do it? We need to communicate. We need to be able to be honest in our interactions, our communication. We need to have time together, shut the TV off, playing games, for example, or go out and like board games. Hiking, or board games, or go out and go for a hike, for a walk, go camping, do things that take you outside of the environment of just the electronic media. Do you think depression is really the opposite of hope? In one sense, yes. Because when we're depressed, I don't have, one of the symptoms of depression is I don't have much hope. So clearly we want to bring people who are depressed, I have to get rid of their anger first. In therapy, that's what I do. I work their anger out, but then I also project them in the direction of hope for themselves for the future. How about if somebody has a specific purpose in life? It may be a goal to try and achieve. That helps. Do you think that'll help too? It helps a lot, yeah. In what way? Can you explain that? Well, because I'm building myself towards something, and I'm not feeling bad about myself. Like, if I don't have a place to put my energy and my time, etc., I'm going to be very self-focused. If I'm self-focused, I'm in danger of being depressed. How about the influences surrounding ourselves with a good support group, and we have to maybe choose our friends a little more carefully? What are your thoughts on those? Well, one of the advantages of church, quite frankly, is it's an interacting place, potentially. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to. You could go to a church and come and leave and never talk to anybody. That's the potential. But it's designed as a place. So community, whether it's community centers, whether it's hockey or sports, etc., we need interaction. We're not designed for being able to look at a screen the whole time.
But let's look at this book once again here. Graham Bretherick, registered psychologist, president of Run Free Ministries, and author of Healing Life's Hurts. Thanks a lot for joining me on Bridge City News.
You're welcome. Thanks, Hal.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, take care, and have a great night.